Good evening and welcome to Athens City Council. It's Monday night, November 20th, 7:04 p.m. We have two committee meetings tonight before we'll go into our regular business session for reading of ordinances. Our first committee meeting is Planning and Development Committee, and that's chaired by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. Tonight we have our belated presentation by the EDC, the Economic Development Council, by Sarah Mars Maxfield. So welcome. And so we can hold our questions until the end of the presentation, and then we can have a discussion about going forward. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I have a presentation I'm going to show you today. I don't see it coming up on, and do you all see it? There we go. Perfect. Thank you. So our EDC staff, it deserves a new introduction because we have pretty much all new staff since the last time I was here. We have Ashley Latanantsingh-John, who's here in the audience with us. She's our project specialist at the EDC. We have Michael Covert, and he is a contract employee that's helping us execute some of the strategic plan initiatives. And we have Brad Widener is our new administrative assistant. So I wanted to take a moment to let you know who they are and that those are the folks that are helping us execute all of the things that we're doing at the Economic Development Council. Beginning with our supporting partners, we have our institutional partners, which consist of course, the city here in Athens. We have Athens County and Ohio University. We have our organizational partners, the Athens County Port Authority, Ohio Health, and the Community Improvement Corporation. And then we have an affiliate partner, the Athens Township Trustees. Regional and state partners that we work with on a regular basis: Appalachian Partnership for Economic Growth, Jobs Ohio, the Buckeye Hills Regional Development District, Ohio Development Services Agency, and the Eastern Ohio Development Alliance. And then our collaborating partners, those that we work really closely with more on the local level as we're executing programs, initiatives, and things that we're working on with our companies here locally are all listed there. I'm sure I forgot a few, but those are the ones that we work with on a regular basis. Also wanted to give you an idea of some of our current clients, client companies that we're working with here in our Athens County communities. Wanted to give you guys all a little bit of an overview to begin with, population, jobs, and median household income. Our population grew by about a little over 1,000 folks in the last 5 years and is projected to grow about to 1,500 more in the next 5 years. Jobs grew by 1,434 over the last 5 years, and it's projected to grow by about 1,200 jobs over the next 5 years. Our median household income currently is $33,900. That's about $20,000 below the national median household income, and that's important because that's part of the reason why we focus on the activities that we focus on that I'll be talking about further in the presentation. Population characteristics, we're somewhat of an unusual community. We have a significant proportion of our population currently that is of what we call the millennial generation, ages 20 to 34. You can see the little black bubble indicates the national average and where it is. And then retiring, we have about 8,000 folks that should be retiring soon. And then our racial diversity, we're somewhat lacking in that capacity as well. Workforce characteristics, I wanted to give you a snapshot of our largest occupations. They have the top 5 listed here. These are post-secondary teachers. and there's 2016 average hourly earnings of $31.45 per hour. Food preparation, service workers, fast food, $9.04 an hour. Office clerks, general office workers, $15.79. Secretaries, administrative assistants, legal, medical, and executive assistants, $16.21. And waiters and waitresses at $9.45 an hour. I've talked with you all before about our significant proportion of our jobs in Athens being below a livable wage, and that's something that we identified early on in the strategic planning process that we really wanted to focus on those companies and those opportunities that were creating higher wage jobs so that our citizens have the opportunity to do all the things they need and some of the things that they want and have an opportunity for growth within the company. So I'm going to give you a couple of highlights of our strategic plan. Our goals were lofty. We wanted to add 2,500 jobs, high wage jobs, and cut the poverty rate for children and increase the per capita income. To reach those goals, our objectives were to retain all of our major private sector employers. We want to attract 10 new major employers with about 25 jobs each into the county, develop 5 new sites prepared for a range of development opportunities, and develop an Athens community fund to help encourage the growth of our small businesses and early stage technology companies in the community. In order to reach those objectives, our strategies are to retool our organization, to get engaged in the site development business, and to focus on advanced manufacturing and advanced services and technology industries for future growth, because those are the industries that we know we have the workforce currently for, and those are the industries that offer a wage that's above the median income. So we had all of these tactics that we laid out that we wanted to do, so specific action items that we were going to do to accomplish these goals. I'm not going to linger too much on this because the next few slides show where we are today after releasing this less than a year ago. So tactic number 1, increase our private sector budget as the EDC so that we can support some of the activities that we do and not relying too much heavily on public dollars. This is ongoing. We have a new private sector partner at Ohio Health that we've secured this year. We have a new employee that we have, Micah Cover, a contract employee, and we are continuing to seek out some other private sector partners that we would include within the EDC. It was suggested that we remake our website and launch a comprehensive economic development marketing campaign targeting those industries that were aforementioned. This is completed and ongoing. We have a brand new website. We've rebranded. And as far as the marketing campaign, that is in progress. The council needed to implement an aggressive business retention and expansion program. This is completed and ongoing. This year alone, we've had 22 initial visits with companies within Athens County, and we've had 19 follow-up visits from those initial 22 visits and calls. Getting engaged in the site development business, a little bit more complicated and relies on a lot of partner cooperation. But we wanted to develop 2 new industrial parks and office complex tied to rail, road, broadband, and energy infrastructure, focus on marketing those efforts, on manufacturing, advanced services, and technology-oriented companies. This is also in progress. Multiple sites are in various stages of the development process, and relationships with advanced manufacturing companies have been building in the last 8 months. Exploring the use of the new downtown redevelopment program to enhance the historic downtown Athens redevelopment efforts for additional office space in the city of Athens, focus marketing efforts on small businesses and advanced services firms along the West Union Street, connecting downtown to the Ohio University Innovation Center. We have 3 DRDs in the city of Athens that are nearing completion. We have drafts of those plans ready to go. We're still finalizing some of the data on what we expect as investment in those areas. And we have one in Nelsonville that is also, the draft is complete and the legislation is already written. So we're well on our way with that goal. should develop the ridges on Ohio University campus to provide new development opportunities through private developer partnerships. This is ongoing and in progress. We're working with Ohio University leadership on various plans and ideas about what may or may not happen up there at the ridges. We should facilitate the acquisition of the Athens County Fairgrounds for future development purposes, and this is on hold at this time. Build on a successful small business and technology-based economic development strategy here. We wanted to attract small business and technology jobs through the creation of the Athens Community Fund and a development of a technology accelerator in the city of Athens. This is ongoing. The initial information gathering is complete. The legal structures, partners, and potential clients and funders have been identified, and we're continuing to work with our committee on this. You all know that last year I gave you a project highlight of Athens Mold and Machine. This was the same slide that I shared with you last year, and I wanted to share some information about where we are 1 year into this project. There are 34 full-time jobs at this site, with a year-to-date payroll from January of 2017 of $621,187.21. All new payroll, all new jobs. And of course, we had the ribbon cutting for the road work that was secured through this project on October 12th, 2017. So that's all of us at North 1804 Way. The mayor was there, Michelle was there. There was quite a few people there, but we stopped traffic for a while to get a nice photo. Current projects that are happening right now, we've been working with RXQ Compounding. They have 22 jobs retained and an annual payroll of $663,423 here within the city. They have committed to creating 75 new jobs at a minimum payroll of $2,926,866, and they've committed to $2.6 million in capital investment. We've been working with this company for a little less than a year. We helped them to identify and secure an Athens County location for this expansion. We liaised on the company's behalf with Jobs Ohio to aid in securing their inducement package that they received. We completed all the preliminary work for the Enterprise Zone Agreement under the State of Ohio Enterprise Zone Program, and we go before Athens County Commissioners on November 28th for local approvals on this. We also have been assisting them with the application for the SOA CDF, which is the tobacco money, for equipment and grant funding. This project is about to break ground. The location that they chose and that they purchased was a idle piece of property that wasn't being used in Albany, at the old Ohio Health Building. They purchased it, they're renovating it, and they're doubling the square footage. So that's what's happening. Another one that's coming down the pipeline, Black Elk Biotech. This is the medical marijuana cultivation company that we've been working with, again, for about a year now. They have committed to 20 to 30 full-time employees with a salary range of $31 to $125. So we also helped this company identify a building location to fit the stringent state requirements through the control program through the state of Ohio. We worked with Paul Logan, other city and county and township officials to make that happen. We facilitated presentations between Black Elk and community leaders and citizens to share the vision of the business so that people could understand that this was a medical marijuana grow facility, not necessarily a go and buy your recreational marijuana facility. So there was a little bit of a misconception about the company. So we did take them around the community to make some presentations and educate people about what they're doing. We facilitated all the required approvals and support letters for their application to the state of Ohio's large-scale cultivation licensure program. And we negotiated an option to purchase the land on behalf of the Port Authority for their future location of Black Elk. We also facilitated the approval of an inducement resolution to issue bonds for the financing of the facility construction on this project. Some city impact numbers. Again, this is something that I shared with you last year, so I thought it would be good to share some similar things. We have payroll taxes steadily increasing. 2016, last year, the final numbers were 10,695,614, and this year, as of 10/31, they're 10,198,350. 40% of hotel stays in Athens stem from overnight business activity. And so we take that number and calculate it by 40%. So you can see that that's also increasing. So as the numbers go up, that indicates that we have a couple of good things that are going on within the community. Also wanted to update you quickly on the U.S. EPA Brownfields grant. These are the beneficiaries of the grant thus far. All of this grant funding was secured by our office for the Port Authority for Phase 1, Phase 2 environmental assessments, all the way up to cleanup planning. And these are the properties that have gone through the program so far. Most recently, we did a Phase 1 and a Phase 2 environmental study for the former Gen Coatings building to identify any challenges that may exist there for the redevelopment of that building so that we can get a productive company in there that's employing folks. And then we just approved last week the Avalanche Pizza location. The proprietor of Avalanche is purchasing the property after years of being a long-term leaseholder, and we approved the funding of the environmental assessments of that property to facilitate the sale of that property to John. That's all I have for you this evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one quick question. You talk about jobs that are promised in some of these processes and some of the projects that you have. What is the follow-up with the various grants and loans, those sort of things, when the jobs do not develop because the company just doesn't fly or doesn't work?
Well, I can give you an idea of one. Before I came into this position, there was an enterprise zone agreement and a project that was called Purely American, and that company continued to underperform. That company is brought in on an annual basis in front of the Tax Incentive Review Council that's led by Jill Thompson. And numbers, payrolls, whatever their commitment was, is collected by our office. It's presented. The proprietor shows up. There's a county commissioner there. Wherever it's located, there's a township trustee from that township. So that council has a chance to speak with that proprietor and discuss if there's an underperformance issue. And in that case, we lessened the benefit, and eventually we extinguished it because there was no improvement in that situation.
Right. And any sort of tax abatements or anything that they got in the very beginning, do they have to pay it back?
That I did not write that agreement, so I am not sure. That would be at the that would have been written in the agreement, and it's up to the commissioners whether or not they want to claw that back.
Yeah. But you don't have any protocol to look at this in a more kind of systematic way, knowing that people come forward and sometimes there's a bidding war about benefits that communities can give to businesses. Let them know up front X, Y, and Z can happen if you do not do something.
Yes, they let them know up front.
Okay, but it turns to the commissioners and other elected officials when they don't follow through on their commitment.
It depends on who the agreement is with. Mm-hmm. So if the agreement's with the city, it would be the city. Mm-hmm. But in these cases, it was with the county commissioners. Is there a particular project you're thinking of that you feel that wasn't?
No, it's just a lot of with Jobs Ohio, there's been, a lot of really great press releases and, this company is going to stay, but when you look at it two or three years down the line, it hasn't been as wonderful as all the press releases. And then people have to start deciding on what has to happen, and if they've been given, benefits up front, that can put the different entities at risk of losing money. If they go out of business, or they default, or they become bankrupt. And I just, the money that we have to do those sort of tools is limited. So I want to make sure that
which is why we at the local level put those in the agreements. I certainly can't speak for Jobs Ohio, and that's not our county's money, and that's not your purview, and that's Jobs Ohio. So to give you an example, when we did the income credit for CGI, there's a clawback that I wrote into that agreement specifically.
Right.
And therefore, if they had taken that benefit, which they have not, we would have been entitled to claw that back, and that would have been up to City Council.
Okay. One of the other questions I had, if you look at the tools that you have, when it comes to somebody coming forward and saying, calling up your office and saying, I have a great idea, I want to work on a restaurant, I want to do these sort of things, how, some kind of business plan help. I need help being able to go through all the different things that I have to do to open a business in Athens. When somebody calls your office like that, what are the processes that you give them, and how can the other entities like Athens City Council help with that process?
We are the first, we're the door to that. And so although all of those resources don't necessarily exist within our offices, we're partners with all of them. So if it's someone that's literally brand new, knows nothing about business, but has a great idea, we typically work with them through the appropriate entity. So it depends on what their idea is. If it's a food-based business, we have great relationships with AceNet, so I'll connect them with Larry Fisher. If it's something that's more in the makerspace manufacturing, I'll connect them with one of our makerspace locations. If it's literally somebody who has a product or an idea, but they just don't have a business plan, we connect them with the SBDC, because that's where their expertise lies.
And where is the SBDC?
It's up at
the
Small Business Development Center, yes.
Right.
It's up at the Voinovich School. Additionally, we have on our site a business startup guide for Athens, Ohio, and in it, it gives you all of those different steps and the things that you need, and there's all of the contacts in there. So those who are less inclined to maybe reach out by phone have access to that.
Do you find that maybe there's need to have more facilitation and walking people through the plan instead of saying, here's a person that we need to go to, you can call them, whether we need some kind of central space to just do, help small businesses get through all the paperwork?
Do I feel that there needs to be
that's something that we have covered? Or?
I think we have it well covered, and we have it, there's many overlapping areas. Okay. So I feel it's well covered. 9 times out of 10, to be quite honest with you, when they come through the door and they have the idea, it's an idea, and honestly, out of 100 people that I would send to whatever resource is appropriate, maybe 5 of them actually follow through and put pen to paper and work on the idea themselves once they find out what all is involved.
But there needs to be a central portal for people to contact. And you feel comfortable that you have the capacity to be able to do that?
We do that. We do that every day. Right. That's part of why we run the Entrepreneurial Development Group. And all of those collaborating partners that I showed early on in the presentation, we all come together once a month. We discuss our small business and entrepreneurial client needs, and we connect with each other.
I know that people have approached me in certain instances with frustration because there is not the obvious, this is where you go. And I've talked with the website people on the city, there's the idea that you should be able to go on some website and in 30 seconds be able to click on 4 things and have a sheet spun out at you saying this is what you need to do. So,
but it's different for every type of business.
Right, but whether we're open and have the things where everybody is in, people who don't know really what they're doing, whether they're an entrepreneur or a restaurant owner or this, where they fit in. And for me, it's important to have the processes and everybody working together to be able to coordinate it all. And so I'm, asking as a city council person, the development and planning person, whether that is whether that position is needed or how we need to coordinate, or whether you feel that it's just...
we've talked about this a lot in the entrepreneurial environment, and, I don't have a silver bullet answer for you as far as if there's a one-stop shop that's going to satisfy everybody's needs. There are multiple portals into the entrepreneurial landscape that is happening here, and we work very hard to capture as much as we can. It's not all going to be online, so this is why we hope and encourage people to reach out directly. We actually have, Jennifer Simon is here, and she's been in the entrepreneurial system significantly longer than I have, but when we've talked about it, we've kind of talked about having a larger pipeline like this so everyone knows where to go coming down to here. Mm-hmm. And we've come back again and again to say what we really need to do is continue to connect on a personal level to where that person needs to go.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Thanks so much for being here. Great presentation.
Sure.
I appreciate the fact that child poverty is a metric that you try to measure your success against. And I also appreciate the priority on a livable wage. And regardless how uncertain we might feel about Jobs Ohio and whatever mysteries might be there, it sounds like you're doing an incredible job at the local level, developing these businesses, creating those jobs at the pay rate that we want to see it at. So congratulations on that. I do have two questions. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of site prep and what goes into that? And then my other question is, you talked about a marketing campaign to industry. What would that look like? What do they need to see?
They need to see the sites.
Okay.
So the reason that has not yet occurred is because we do not yet have the sites prepared. There's a significant lack of buildable or existing buildings and sites in Southeast Ohio. It's not just Athens County. And when we're looking at capturing some of the activity that's happening in the advanced manufacturing industry and some of those other industries that we've identified that we have the ready, willing workforce to supply, we don't have necessarily a site ready for them. So we've been very successful through the Port Authority at the industrial park out at Poston Road because there's flat land there, there's sewer service, there's public water, there's broadband, and those are the main things that you have to have. So much of the land throughout the county that has that is already being utilized. So first what we want to do as economic developers, and hopefully as any developer, is identify the sites that are being underutilized, or what we call brownfields, sites that have been used as another purpose at another time, and try to redevelop those first, because we don't want to go into our greenfield space. We would prefer to stay within something that's already been utilized for commercial development. When those are gone and have been occupied, you have to look beyond and see what we have. Our topography makes it challenging. Our floodplain makes it challenging. And so we have a scarce number of sites, especially specifically within the city. So we really have been identifying some locations around the perimeter and where it makes more sense, and where it's in the comprehensive plan for the county, kind of out towards the Albany direction. When you're looking at those, sewer can be a challenge, public water can be a challenge, all of those things. And so we work really hard, low and slow and under the water line, to help get those infrastructure pieces in place and to play the role with our local legislators, that we want that to be there for not just for the households that currently exist out there, but future phase 2 to handle economic development opportunities. So, site development, environmental assessments are important, geotechnical assessments are important. We have to do all sorts of due diligence on the potential property. And so it's a really slow-moving proposition, but it's what we need to do. And in the last several years, we've missed out on 30-some potential opportunities that wanted to come to Southeast Ohio, that said, yes, we are willing to come to Southeast Ohio, that's where we want to be. And there are many communities around us that are vying for those opportunities, and we don't oftentimes even have a property to submit for those opportunities. So we calculated it's something like 700 jobs that we've missed out on potentially vying for. Of course, we wouldn't get every single one of those, but the ones that are a right fit for our community and the ones where our workers have the appropriate skills and the ones that we really want to have here, we want to at least have the option to try for it. And so we're working hard on trying to develop some potential sites.
One more follow-up. You mentioned that Fairgrounds project is on hold. Can you talk a little bit more about the Fairgrounds project, like why it's on hold?
This is a conversation that's been had many, many times, and I think it's challenging because people are very tied to that location, and the Fair Board is, there's some nostalgia and history and love of that location, and so we're just having those conversations very delicately.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have a couple. You mentioned the uptown area?
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit more about that?
The Downtown Redevelopment District?
Yes.
Okay. So the Downtown Redevelopment District is a new tool through the state of Ohio. It works similarly as a TIF. Are you all familiar with how a TIF works? So it works kind of like a TIF. The uses of the funds are more flexible. So the municipality where the DRDs exist controls what happens with that money and guides where that money will go. But they're 10-acre 10 acres. It can be the largest. It has to be anchored by a historical building or a building within the historical district, and when the DRD is put into place, then any of the increase of the property tax value is put into a separate pot. That can be used for not only infrastructure improvements, but it can also be used to incentivize building owners to redevelop historical buildings, so you can give them low interest loans or grants. It can be used to help start like a city funded incubator. So there can be used for economic development purposes as well. And you can give direct loans to companies if it's then also an innovation district, which means it has a certain level of broadband, which that West Union corridor does. So our intention eventually is to get an innovation district designation down that area so that it's just a tool, an attraction, and a way to develop that in the way that we think will benefit the city as a whole.
The other question I had to do with, so if I am a business and I want to be involved in your group and, in the economic, is there a fee for that, or what? How does that work?
The bylaws don't, there's a fee. They can be a member. I think it's for $100 an individual business, but it's the bylaws really, it's not like the chamber. It's a very different animal. And the bylaws actually identify the potential partners. They're written out, who the partners could be when the framers framed the ACEDC.
Which was how many years ago? Do you know?
I'm going into my 10th year now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple. Looking at this innovation zoning, these sound like overlay zones. And that would have to have cooperation with the city council. And I wonder how some of the downtown development districts are coordinating with the SID that's going, trying to be put forward, because we have certain things that are going on at the city level, and we want to be able to coordinate them with what you're doing and the other, and so we are not going at cross purposes.
Mm-hmm. I don't believe they're in the same area footprint, are they, Mayor?
They're not.
They're not in the same overlay.
They can overlap each other.
Right. Can you say what a SID is?
Sure, Special Improvement District.
Thank you.
Special Improvement District, as I mentioned to council a couple weeks ago, is basically a self-imposed property tax or taxation by linear foot on the property owners, but that money is restrictive. It can only be used for beautification projects in the prescribed Special Improvement District. where the DRD, Downtown Redevelopment District, as Sarah was saying, is a lot more flexible. I would like to chime in just for a second. With the DRD, there's also what's called an innovation district, which can be nested in a DRD. But what's required is you have to have 100 gigs down, and it's 100 gigabits, not 100 gigabytes. So it's what, 12.5 gigabytes? But that's a requirement. But that also becomes a tool in the toolbox if you are looking to attract and enhance technologies and technology and development within that area if they need that level of, and most people do, of broadband. So it's a great tool. Both of them are great. As you guys know, council knows that I serve on the board of directors for the convention users. No, I don't. For the economic development, and the DRDs working with a group called the Montrose Group and kind of trying to figure out strategically where are locations in the city that could likely see some further development because either there's land there or there are resources, fixed assets that are there that are assets that could be utilized in a different way in the future. So it gives us a lot of leverage by having these 3 DRDs. I don't think we're going to necessarily end at 3 DRDs. No. I think that once the SID is going, then we can circle back around and start looking at, is there a possibility to do a 10-acre overlay that might capture part of Court Street. I will share this with you. Sitting down with the city planner and trying to figure out what does 10 acres look like in the uptown area, it's smaller than you think. The beauty of a DRD, and I learned this through the whole process, is that a DRD, for lack of a better term, you can form this, I don't want to use the word gerrymander because that's a bad word these days. You can create this to where a street is part of that connector to where it helps you in being able to draw out and rethink what would you like to capture in a DRD. So it kind of gives you this tentacle, if you will, this avenue where it's fairly small and not taking up a lot of real estate, so not counting for an awful lot within your 10 acres. And it may not even count at all, depending on, you know.
I don't think it does. It's So it doesn't have to be, I want to see if I'm using this word, it doesn't have to be contiguous, it just has to be continuous. So you can use rights of way of streets to capture and connect areas of opportunity to the DRD that's then maybe connected on the other end by the one historical building that exists in that area. So it is a really interesting proposition. It gives you some flexibility on doing some things that typically sometimes might be challenging in finding the funding for as a city government. The city would pass the ordinance and the city would approve the development plan. It requires an economic development plan to go with it, which we funded this year for the city and for the city of Nelsonville. And it's certainly going to be something once the maps are completely finalized, which we're almost there with the 3 DRDs for Athens City. We'll certainly be talking with you about that and how it works, and the city has the final say about how that money is spent and where it goes.
And right now we are going through our comprehensive planning process, so any sort of those sort of issues have to come forward so that they can be discussed through that process because it's comprehensive, and that I'd like to see those sort of things before so that we're not like surprised on some of the things that come from from other organizations that say, oh, well, we wanted to do this. So I know that you're a part of the advisory, but those sort of things need to be put in earlier than later so that we can discuss those as a community, because that's what we do. We're very involved planning. When it comes to planning, we're very involved and very transparent, and it may seem like a lot of sausage making, but in the end, when you have the support of the community, better things can happen going forward.
And once they're complete, we will share the drafts.
So
they're just not complete yet.
So one more comment. You sat on the housing committee with us for that year before the report came out. Here's an opportunity for you to also speak how this affects economic development, if you want to make a statement on that.
one of the biggest challenges we have in retaining our talent here in this community is affordable housing. And although it's not necessarily in my wheelhouse, it's more of a community development thing. From a personal level and from what I've heard from my companies that I work with, it's one of the top reasons why they lose employees that are in that millennial generation, which is a significant proportion of our population at this point. So finding affordable housing within the city, which is often folks will say, well, they can just go outside the city and it's much cheaper. That's not what they mostly are looking for. They're wanting to be close to those amenities. They want to be near the bike path. They want to be in a walking community, walkable, bikeable. All those things are what they're really looking for. And some of our companies are losing their best talent because they can't find homes that are affordable. Not only are the wages a little bit lower in Athens, but the housing stock is quite a bit higher. So there's an opposing force going on there, and we've seen it. We've only seen it getting worse and worse and worse. And yeah, I sat on that committee for a year with Michelle and others, and and it's a big challenge. And I don't know how exactly to fix it, right. But it's a challenge, and it's going to continue to be a challenge.
Right. Well, and we're going forward with our Affordable Housing Commission. And one of the things with what you're talking about, the city has looked at with their sustainability plan, and so a lot of things are meshing together. I just want to ensure that there's communication between all the different entities that are doing all this stuff and making sure that we know who's doing what and where we can direct people is one of the issues. Pete, did you have a question?
I did, yes. And this is circling back to the developmental, please give me the acronym.
The Downtown Redevelopment Districts.
Okay, thank you. And so, and I just want to just understand, so this is, you can, through planning, pretty much determine almost block by block what you would like to encourage in that area. Is that kind of what you can? Is it kind of a tool that we can use to?
It's a tool that you'll use to attract investment.
Correct.
So.
Specific kind of investment, or I mean, is it like? I mean, it sounded like it was, you know,
well, that would
maybe
be
like a.
More zoning, but it's an overlay that's within, if it's within the DRD, because all of the proceeds that are collected from the DRD have to be then spent within the DRD. So it has to be spent on DRD properties or on public infrastructure that's within the DRD overlay. So it doesn't, as a city, you can determine, hey, we want to see this kind of investment in this area, but that the DRD doesn't limit the type of investment that happens.
Okay.
We just want to see investment.
Oh, yeah, no, agreed.
And a DRD cannot be created over a residential area. You can't take a neighborhood and go, okay, there's a historic something in the middle of this, and we're going to carve out a DRD around a residential district.
What I would say about the DRD is that, you know, we have the idea of during the comprehensive plan of a meeting in a box and producing very specific discussion about things like overlay zones, traffic concerns in certain neighborhoods, and that would be done on not the giant visioning level of planning, but more expertise and those sort of things so we can plug it back into. So I would encourage that, you know, like we get together because anything with overlay zones, they have to go through planning and development and make sure that we are all on the same level when we're talking about these things, because ultimately the people, you know, that everybody has to buy into the comprehensive plan because that's what it is, and it's more public and more participation, the better in my view. And so it's also an education process of many people probably are overwhelmed by all the SIDs and the DRDs and the EDCs, and we're very comfortable in thinking about that, but we need to make sure that we bring everybody along because this is a discussion that happens, and it's an opportunity to have a lot of education sort of thing. Michelle?
So I would just, my final statement on all of this would be the collaborative efforts of many different groups are what makes a positive comprehensive plan or economic development plan. I mean, all these entities need to be thinking about these things. And, you know, the political football of lately has been the school district. So I know that affects your economic development because people ask about the schools. And, you know, we have had a unique situation here in Athens with small schools and neighborhoods and that kind of thing. And I'm not asking necessarily, but I think, again, for the public to understand the importance of the collaboration of all these different entities and having a seat at the table and having that conversation. I think that's why our housing eventual plan worked out so well, because we brought in real estate people. We brought in different people and listened to what their concerns were as we went through that process, you know. So that's my final comment.
So, any other questions?
Just a comment, I think we're in a good place with our city planner who does understand DRDs. So that's kind of an upside with the comprehensive planning. He knows them, he understands them. And so we have that moving forward with helping to bring everyone along with them.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
The second agenda item is the community center solar installation. And I'm going to turn it over to the administration and the presentation to talk about this, which is another license agreement. We have many of those in the city with people who use right-of-way or property, or we've contracted out, and so this is the sort of example of this. So, welcome.
Thank you. My name's Greg Kuss. I'm president of Solar Vision, based out of Columbus, Ohio. This has to do with and I'll just read this here, it's the announcement of our intention to purchase, and that's the solar array at the Athens Community Center. I am with Solar Vision, but Sunlight General Capital and Solar Vision are pleased to announce our shared intention to complete the purchase and sale of the solar array installed on the top of 4 canopies there at the Athens Community Center. Transfer of ownership, subject, of course, to your approval by the City of Athens, would be made to Sunlight's wholly owned acquisition company, SL Buckeye Solar. They go on, and I'll pass some of these around. I've already given Lisa one of them. But we have owned the system for 7 years and had a very good relationship with the City of Athens and the community center. But the time has come where, and it's been in our power purchase agreements, the PPA, that was signed a little over 7 years ago, I believe, that an offer has come up for us to sell it, and it's a good time to do this. And as has been mentioned before, the best time to sell something is when somebody else wants it. Sunlight General, as I'll pass this around, and you can have time to look at, they own 130 similar facilities in the Atlantic coast area and mid-states, Ohio. They've been around for 8 years. They plan on expanding. And what I mentioned to Lisa before is obviously they want to keep this thing up and running and working as good as possible, because that's how they pay for it. So that's basically all I have. We have sent Lisa the consent forms. And as I'll just briefly mention, in our original power purchase agreement, the verbiage is that the buyer has the right to consent to a sale or assignment, which consent shall not be unreasonably withheld. That's a mouthful, unreasonably withheld, I guess. So I guess what I'm saying is this is one of 5 projects we did 7 years ago. They're buying all 5 of our projects. The other entities have signed off on this consent. The terms don't change in the power purchase agreement. Everything stays the same except the owner. And of your initial 20-year agreement, that means you have about 12 and a half left. So that doesn't change either. Any questions?
Well, I think maybe a shout out to Allahu Ghazni, who started this whole process, and it's been, people point to it all the time. I mean,
Wonderful.
It's been very successful. I think that a lot of people don't understand the power purchasing process which is another PPP. And how these solar arrays work, whether we have a solar farm in Albany, hopefully someday, and all these other things, is that they don't necessarily go right to the building that they're next to. They dump energy into the grid, and things like what we do as an aggregation, we can go and purchase and invest in those sort of projects, which is what people are doing with the community center, which is how you develop the solar industry to the juggernaut that it is as it's going forward and going past coal and natural gas into the bright sunshine future that is Athens. And my 2 cents on this is great because this is how it functions and capitalizes. So
yeah, these things are not going to work unless people make money at them. And they are buying these different price. 7 years ago, these things were phenomenally expensive. Now they're not so expensive, and they're they can make their 8% or whatever, and they're not out for the moon. They're out just to have investors in these projects. So, and it's to people's benefit to acknowledge that the early adopters, such as your company, helped to get to this point. Well, and then Athens was, we know the number of installers around here. Anyhow, the Greenfields and Dovetail Solar and the likes that they've been at it early on, and Athens was one of the first to step up, let alone to have the carport system, which I think is the best use of a parking lot going. So, really, this is, of course, I'm going to make it sound simple. We are the owners. They're going to be the owners. Nothing changes, except ownership.
American company?
Yes, they're based out of New York City.
The original agreement, the solar power purchase agreement, there's a section here on disposition of equipment, and the mayor asked me about it earlier. So the original agreement's 20 years. We still have 12 years left. There's an option for 10 additional years for a renewal term. However, the two interesting sections in here are the first section that at the end of the term, that transfer ownership of the system could go to the host, or the owner has the option of removing the system.
So I have a question based on that, and this is something that the law director and I were discussing, and hopefully you can answer it. At the end of that 20 years, or if we opted for the additional 10-year extension on this, at the end of that time, is it then sold to the host, or is it just turned over to the host? Your situation is a little different because there's a structure there, a parking lot structure. So after the 20 years, I think you sign on for another additional time period. I think you can buy it, I think, or we take it down, or we can take it down. Isn't that about what it says,
Yes.
Lisa?
30 years, right?
So we had to make it sound, if you're going to lock us in for 20 years and we're already 7.5 into it, either we extend it, you buy it, or we take it down. Okay, and so that at the end of that time, if we did decide to buy it, the valuation would be said depreciation over time?
There's, I believe, a formula in there.
Okay, all right, I'll look that over in more detail, but that's interesting to note.
Our solar panels, it's great to have them up because it will be an example of old technology by 30 years from now.
But bear in mind that the older technology's shelf life is shorter than the current lifespan of solar panels, which will be shortened based upon 10 years from now. So we'll have to look and see what happens in 12 years.
But it's been phenomenally successful with the public.
Sure.
And stuff.
Sure.
So the original, originally there was an ordinance that authorized the mayor to enter into the SPPA agreement. And now, since there's a request for a transfer of ownership, then needs to come back to council to authorize the mayor to sign the assignment.
And unfortunately, and I apologize to you, Mr. Cos, because we timing-wise, it took us a little while to dig into this and fully get our heads wrapped around it. And I understand that you're kind of under time crunch as well.
It has to, yeah, pretty much has to be done in 2017. Yeah.
We'll be able to.
Plus, I'd like to
There's
add
still-
too,
there's
that
still a
that
month
the
on
electricity that we've been selling to the community center, City of Athens, has been a 15% reduction too, so it was, anyhow, we enjoyed being connected to it as well.
Thank you. Just a quick question for administration. It doesn't really sound like there's a con to this, or if there is, could you share it, and what would our options be if we wouldn't do this?
I don't think that there's any con at all to this. There's really, nothing on the city end. Again, it will be interesting 12 years from now, and some of us likely won't even be here, at least in government office. Okay, we'll speak for myself. So, yeah, but I mean, this is simply a sale from one entity to another. The structure will stay there, and it'll still be capturing energy and producing energy. And so it's a simple sale.
And the maintenance agreements, all those continue, all,
All terms stay the same.
because of course it's to their benefit to keep it maintained.
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you. I expect that the ordinance will be coming forward, and probably depending on special sessions, we have to, no,
We'll be able to meet.
we'll be able to meet it.
There's an emergency clause on this, so.
Right, okay, great, thank you. That's the end of my commission, my committee.
Commission.
We'll move on to the Finance and Personnel Committee with Councilmember Reisner chairing.
Thank you, Madam President. A couple of items tonight. Start off with appropriations. I believe your City Safety Director is talking about a $5,000.
Yes, from the capital funds that we have, but we have it all under capital outlay, and we'd like to place it into police. So 580 and 207. Get that right, before. It's basically the CO chairs. They're expensive chairs, but they're 24/7, 365, and
For dispatch.
yes. And the auditor has 3. Word more.
Okay.
I didn't bring them. I'm sorry.
Care to speak to it, Auditor?
They're all small personnel budget increases. One in water, one in sewer, and one in the internal service fund for mechanics. Less than 7,000, I think, is the most. One on 3,000, 4,000, 7,000, something like that. So it's just to make sure that we can cover our personnel costs at the end of the year. Just looking ahead.
And on that in particular, we are requesting suspension of the rules in order to be able to pay it out in this year's payroll.
Oh, actually, it's another one.
Oh, that's a different one?
Yeah. On second reading,
Yeah, 17.
136.
136.
So
But I
you will
think
not
that
need
Member
these
Reisner's aware of that
to
one
meet the
already.
end of the year as well?
Well, what was yours?
Yeah, 136 is what you're talking about.
Yeah,
Mine
two of
can
them,
go
correct?
through
And
it, but
142.
I'm thinking if we, those are salary items, right?
They are salary items, and this payroll that is this week will be posted next week, and it's a large one because of payouts, end of the year payouts and things like that. So yes, if you don't have any objections to, at the very least, I would like it suspended at second reading. Like the Service Safety Director said, to make sure we have money in there for the end of the year payroll.
Which ordinance number were you talking about for the second suspension?
136.
136 and 142.
Yeah, we could suspend, yeah. Any other appropriations items?
I do not believe so.
Okay. Well, let's get to the biggie here. 2018 budget. I don't know. I've been in budget meetings all day today, and my head is just swimming in figures right now. I'll have nightmares. I can see where it's going. But I think we're getting near the end. I think we've made a lot of progress. I think administration, auditor, and all the staff and council, pat on the back there too. Take a bow. I think by next week, we're gonna have something ready for council to,
Right, we still have a lot of work this week to
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
Now we're at the point where we have the process of cutting. So now we have to go through and start trimming down what we've been pulling together from all the different departments, and so we've got a lot of reduction budgeting to do.
That's a huge
Here's
part of
Vicky.
it at this point. As you know, personnel costs are fixed to a certain extent, and two things I wanted council to be aware of is that we have had to increase the medical fund transfers from the funds to 17,500 to 19,800. We haven't changed in at least 3 years, I don't believe, and the costs just go up. The other side to that is, we asked for an additional appropriation, not very long ago in that fund. Part of the worry is that we have to have a fund balance in that fund because we never know when we're going to get hit with some major bills. They go up and down all the time, so you have to have some cushion. So that's going to add a fair amount of money to everyone's budget who has personnel, which is a large part of the general fund. So I don't know if anybody, do you have any other comments about one? That's the big thing that we're budgeting for, along with everything else.
Basically, what we learned today is that the budget submissions that we've done as a citywide to date for general fund are equals 16.3, and we're being instructed to keep it at flat budget around 15. So this is let's go in and cut about $1 million, at least $1 million, I think is what I hear from the auditor. And that is really going to impact any capital improvements that were planned in here, new cruisers,
A lot of it'll be that. A lot of it's going to be capital improvements,
Fencing.
which we desperately need to make capital improvements, but we've got a lot of trimming to do.
some possible reductions in other expenses as we look through that, or in our 200s and 300s as well. Hopefully not affecting staff. We did have some initiatives that were brought forth this year from department heads, one being separating out our internal services, so you have a true IT department in the mechanics. I think we're about through that one. And the request from Code to have a deputy director whose salary would be split between general fund 40%, garbage 60%, oversee the solid waste control officers and get more invigorated. I think you have a little more to add on that.
I do. I have budgeted within my office a executive secretary. Initially, when I took office, I was going to fill that position with someone who's going to be working on the front line, but we found that things are running pretty smoothly in my office space, so therefore what I'm willing to do is to essentially give up that line and use that down at the code office, because the executive director's position will essentially be over solid waste, an important area. So a portion of the time would be solid waste, a portion of the time would be directly under code. So this is, we've seen some great improvements. We still have a lot more to do, and so this is, I think, a reasonable change in my staffing to move it into an area that's, I think, would be more effective, rather than to me hang on to that particular staffing line.
Member Butler?
Thank you. I briefly wanted to sing the praise of our auditor. This is a daunting process, as the mayor knows, and as Councilmember Reiser just alluded to. And I think we're very fortunate to have a auditor who's been with us through this many administrations. So 4 years, correct me if I'm wrong, working with Mayor Abel, 8 years working with Mayor Weil, and now working with our current mayor. And again, I think this is a daunting process, and it is not easy, as you know. And think about the financial crisis we were dealing with 2007, 2008. So that checks and balances is important. And we may not all agree in this room, but I think we're lucky to have this guidance. So thank you.
Member Fall.
I'm going to put on my, I'm going to get mad at Columbus hat.
I love when you do that.
I think that it's really important to emphasize, you know, there was the Great Recession, and then everything was supposed to be hunky-dory afterwards, and we're still struggling. The local governments are still struggling, and having to cut $1 million out of our budget because Columbus has decided to change whatever, accounting way that they do things and take more of our money to give as tax cuts. And that's happening now at the federal level. One of the things at the federal level is they're looking at removing the tax exempt bonds that communities like us use all the time as a way of getting people to invest in communities. So I think that we are still in the recession. This university isn't doing a pay raise. And so people should be outraged because Columbus certainly seems to be happy to be spending money on things like tax cuts for the rich and everything, and Washington does, but we're still struggling. And we're seeing it right now, tonight. And I hope that Columbus, they're kind of done with their budget year, hopefully, the damage that they can do. But they still have lots of time. They can just bring in something else, like the tax collection thing that we've been seeing that's going to cost us, $100,000 or whatever. So
it's already in there, but Athens has joined that group to try to stop that. That would start next year and hurt us once again as far as revenue, in particular the general fund.
Right. So I would put heat on Representative Jay Edwards and say, we need things in the capital budget. We need to have the things that make our community function. We just had a presentation from the EDC about what we need as a community to bring jobs down here. We don't need having all the money flying out towards Columbus. We need it back in here. Thank you.
Member Pepe.
To go back down in the weeds a little bit, let's go back to the code recommendation by having this additional staff person, supervisor, manager, whatever, one of the things that I've noticed over the years, and having served on the BZA as well, is, we're kind of a complaint-driven system, and I would hope with more employees that maybe we could, whether it's follow-up on BZA variances to make sure that that's actually the variance that was given is actually what occurs at that property, no matter, what it is. We have a developer with us tonight who's received, we're going to pass an ordinance, but there's been variances. I think that's one thing over the years that I've been concerned about. And then, of course, everything's complaint driven. So if I'm driving down the street and I happen to see something, that doesn't necessarily mean I stop because I'm on my way to the next thing or doing whatever I'm doing. We're into the weeds on a few other issues I won't get into tonight. But I would hope that if there was an additional manager, that some of this other stuff that just continues to happen year after year, whether it's administratively or for whatever reason, would be improved. Because I think many would agree, if they know of some of these issues, that we need to make some progress on that.
We could certainly look into that. I do need to qualify all of this, is that the pay band for the executive secretary is lower than what a manager or assistant manager level would be, and so it's still budget permitting as we go through this process. That's why I mentioned the 40-60 split in terms of where the money would be coming from to fund this. But we're hoping that we can get there. Certainly a conversation I can have with the director of Code, Rick Sorois, about having someone who's doing something similar to what you're talking. I think it's a good idea. But again, a lot of this is all predicated upon the budgeting process, which will wrap up in the next couple of weeks. We'll see.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have another comment?
Madam President?
No, I was just wondering if Auditor had
I did have just a
comment.
couple comments.
Yes.
Well, I wanted to thank Member Butler. He and I have worked together
You're welcome.
a long time as auditor and council member. But that's the other part of the process, and council does have a responsibility of part of the checks and balances of the city, and I appreciate always having your ear and cooperation. You know, I don't win all my battles, but you know, that's all part of it. And so I hope that also by Monday to have I'm a little bit afraid, and I've done some work on it, is the revenue projection. Because as much as I believe in rewarding your employees, and if you're giving raises to 90%, you should be including the other 10%, at least some minimal level. But they can't do their job without their tools either. And so it's really hard this year in particular, I think, to have to say no new vehicles, no computers, no this, no that. But I think we'll get there, and we've been through these tough times before. And so we'll have to see what happens, because as we raise these medical expenses, that takes money out of every budget that has personnel. And of course, there's a lot in the general fund, all of police and fire. But it will affect everybody, but there's just no way around that. So there's a lot of things that we're working through.
Citywide, what percentage of our expenses are personnel?
Oh, we've always said at least 70%. 70 to 80 is actually.
I think that's important for people to realize where their tax money's going.
How about medical?
Because a $50,000 salary actually costs us at least $75,000 to $80,000 when you get retirement, Medicare, all the other workers' comp, and everything else that we have to pay. Taxes, state, federal.
What about our medical plans?
Yeah. That's, I don't know if you want me to say this out loud. I said it in our meeting today, which has been a wonderful change for me as auditor to have these actual budget meetings with the finance chair and the administration, where we actually pick through the budget instead of people just throwing budgets at them. They throw it together and give it to me, and I'm like, you know, my revenue's here, your budget's up here. And then we go through a lot of me asking for changes in January and February. Hopefully we'll be more on target this time around. It's been quite a process and a lot of time spent by all of us doing that. But yes, our revenue from our employees' contribution to our medical fund is really, really, really small compared to what our costs are. Our costs are about $3.4 million as of now, mid-November. It's not even for the year. So we pay a lot of money for our medical coverage, which is really very good coverage. And our contributions are $125,000 from employees. So something we need to work on as we go along.
That's a high priority issue for 2018, is looking at our health care benefits and the costs incurred with those. If I may, I want to also just mention briefly, you know, Patty Whitmer, my executive assistant, she has been working feverishly on this budget. She's the one who, as budgets go out to the departments and then they come back, that she's the one who collates everything. She makes sure everything is in the right lines, and then it comes to the meetings, which is with Finance and Personnel, the Chair of Finance and Personnel, Jeff Reisner, the City Auditor, Service Safety Director, and myself, and Patty's sitting in there in the room too, and we're going through and hashing this out. It's a team effort, and I don't, in my terms on City Council, I don't necessarily remember it being team effort when we go through the budget, and I can't speak to the previous administrations before that. But that's kind of how I think is the constructive way to go as we move forward, to where we literally sit in the front conference room for a couple hours at a time, or longer or less, depending on how much we get through. But we're all working on this together, and it's a great checks and balances to where we're sitting in one place at one time.
I have to add one thing.
As well as, I'm sorry, if I may.
The deputy auditor, she's the one
Yes.
actually doing the work in my office. She, and we tried something different this year, and they kind of jumped on board with us. For several years, we've prepared the personnel budget, because You got to get that in your budget first and sent that out, and then they can make changes if they're going to change positions. It's a lot of work to go through and do all those changes. Council has asked, what if we give them 1%? What if we give them 3%? What if we give them 2.5%? You know, and she's done all those calculations in spreadsheets. Her stack of files for the different budgets is like this right now. And then this year she went through and did the non-personnel parts of the budgets, and for a starting point for the department heads, and they could go in and make changes. And so, yes, so those all come back to us for her to look at and adjust. And then, as the mayor said, Patty puts them up there so we can all look at the same screen at the same time and pick through them line by line, which is a lot of account lines. Any of you who looked at our expense report know that. So it's quite a process, and these people have worked really, really hard on that. Hopefully it'll work out better, but, you know, we'll find out. Thank you.
Any further questions considering the 2018 budget?
So we'll have the budget, our staffing ordinance, and the non-union benefits. There are a few changes to that, and we'll just make sure that we highlight that out as well. A lot of it's cleanup language.
Okay.
If we could just go back to appropriations transfers that was passed, should we amend 142 to add in your additional 5,000, or should we just make that a separate ordinance for to be passed some other time?
Can we do all of them?
All of them.
Well, Kathy had
Kathy's
additional.
already there.
Yes, could you please amend?
To amend 142.
Yes.
Yes.
To include.
To include.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Write all that down somewhere. My brain is fuzzed out. Okay, so next week we'll have it, and you're going to have a whole new source of revenue also to
Pay for everything.
pay for everything. So good.
Sure.
Good. Very good. That's all I have, Madam President.
Thank you. All right. We'll move on to the regular portion of the business meeting. The first item being establishing a quorum. All members but Councilmember McGee are here tonight. And the next item is disposition of the minutes. And we have a regular session held on November 6th and a special session held on November 13th. Could I have a motion for approval of these minutes?
Second.
We have a motion and second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the minutes have been approved. For communications, the several items that the City Council has received. One is a notice from the Department of Commerce, Division of Liquor Control, and this is to notify the city that all permits are up for renewal. Well, they will expire on February 1, 2018, and so they're up for renewal. And the second item is that we are, City Council is in receipt of a letter from Mr. John Spoffworth, who came and spoke before Council a few weeks ago, and that to notify Council members and the city that he is seeking action against the city. So the Law Director has a copy of this letter, as does Council. Third item, to note that Councilmember Katsas has been appointed by the school board at their last meeting to serve as liaison with the city. So we'll look towards continued communications about the school board plans coming up and all the work. So thank you for agreeing to serve. And then, yes, Councilmember Butler.
Thank you. I do want to applaud. I'm assuming that Councilmember Katsas accepted the position, and I do applaud his involvement. I wasn't aware of the process happening, or again, in the spirit of transparency, I didn't know this was going to take place. So I just wanted to share that comment with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other communications from other council members? Mayor?
For communications?
Mm-hmm.
Madam President, in the sake of time for someone who's here, I'm sure, to present or at least to listen to what's going on, I would like to defer my communications to the announcements portion of the agenda tonight.
Okay.
Because I have several things I do want to talk about, but again, I would rather defer so that we can move forward with some
Move
of the
forward with
ordinances.
business. And Law Director Eliason, do you have any items? Okay. All right. Thank you. We'll move on for ordinances for third reading. We have Ordinance 11817, an ordinance amending Ordinance 9914, establishing fees as required by the Athens City Code. And this is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 11817.
Second.
We talked about this. It was discombobulated a bit last time because it came before, one part of it came before the ordinance that it was charging a fee for. This is two changes in fees. One is to charge the fee for sewage delivery to our sewer treatment plant for residential sewage, like when they go and pump out people's septic system. That establishes the per barrel cost on that, and then also the cost for getting a renewed permit, placard, information sign that we are going to pass later tonight in rentals, if they will be provided, and if you need a new one, it will cost a replacement fee. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of Ordinance 11817. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12217 is an ordinance granting variances from the Athens City subdivision regulations to diversified properties for the Madison Heights minor subdivision located on the corner of East State Street and Madison Avenue to allow lot splits. This is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 12217.
Second.
We've talked about this quite a bit. It's one of the several ordinances that are going forward to allow development on this corner property that's better known as the Athens Flower Shop. It's a difficult piece of property, and so to move forward with development of single-family and multifamily homes there, we need to address the lot split and allowing variances for shape and size and frontage. And these were all put forward by the Board of Zoning Appeals, and the Planning Commission has also been part of this. Thank you.
Okay,
And
we
if
have,
I haven't included anything you want, you can, thank you.
we do have the motion and second. Any comments or questions? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries. The ordinance has been approved. Ordinance 12317 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title VII, Traffic Code, Chapter 7.03, Passengers, Operators, Accidents, and 7.09, Penalties, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 12317.
Second.
We've talked about this multiple times on in various meetings. It has to do with changing the traffic code to include changing the ticketing system uptown for jaywalking and bicycle jaywalking and other wheeled jaywalking from a criminal, from a, help me with the word, from criminal to administrative. And that way, besides the police, parking code and other officers can write tickets to those people who are not being safe.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have a motion and second for approval of 12317. Any other questions or comments? Councilmember Butler?
Thank you, and also I know Councilmember Katsas has some questions or comments. And he was, I called Councilmember Katsas prior to the meeting just because I was looking for clarification on a couple of the points on this, and he was very helpful. So my clear and correct understanding that there's been some strikeouts, and we're keeping Court Street, Union, Washington State as areas that shall no longer have cyclists or continue to not have cyclists.
On the sidewalk.
On the sidewalk, correct.
Yeah.
But Congress and College are now exempt. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay,
So it's the more densely packed,
okay.
pedestrian oriented.
Thank you. Mayor.
Any other comments or questions?
I was going to speak to the same thing, so we're done.
Okay.
I'm done.
All right.
Can't speak
We have
for
a-
everyone.
We have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 12317. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12417 is an ordinance amending Title 29, Housing Regulations, Chapter 29.03, Rental Dwelling and Housing Permit, Section 29.03.08.1, Tenant Occupant Education Form, and Section 29.03.09, Display of Permit, introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I move that we adopt 12417.
Second.
Thank you. This is, we've talked about this multiple times. It goes along with the fee change. The occupancy permit and compliance form is meant to take over the role and duties of the dreaded tenant occupancy education form, which people had to go and sign, and we had a court case about it, and the tenants didn't have to sign it, and they were paper, and they sat in the code office. It cost a lot of money and trees. So this is a different way of attaining education and helping all the different types of people who move in to Athens at various times, not just students, to understand the rules and regulations, the laws that make for a good community, also information about garbage and recycling, and Steve has an example. It also has a code so that people can have access to further information from the city. And so I think this is a much better process, and we'll be able to revisit it after a year, and like we do on a lot of our.
So if the camera could zoom into the mayor, he is showing what a form would look like.
Vanna, there's
No, that's not the mayor.
That's not the mayor.
That's
No,
not the
that's
mayor
not
either.
it. Keep going.
Okay.
There we
There
go.
we
Hey.
So, let me angle this. And council had asked for a QR code to be put on there, and it's there. So this is the form.
Yay.
And that will be posted in properties.
This will be posted in a conspicuous location somewhere within the property itself. And Councilmember Fall, you might want to remind everyone that if this is lost or stolen or whatever, that
Right.
there is a fee.
We have just passed an ordinance that is a fee to get a new copy. So that the city will provide the first copy. If it's torn down or something, then the landlord is responsible for the second copy. They will be checked upon when permit
Rental inspection.
the permit inspections are done.
Right.
So, thank you.
Great. Right. We have a motion and second for approval of 12417. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12517 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into or to extend the agreement with the Board of the Athens County Commissioners for the purpose of obtaining the services of the Public Defender's Office through December 31st, 2018. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. This was discussed in committee and led. We have to have the services of a public defenders. That's mandatory for our court. The amount of monies that we will be expending for our share of this will be $150,000 from the 2018 general fund. And so I make a motion that we adopt 12517.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of 12517. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12617 is an ordinance authorizing the law director to hire a legal secretary at a pay rate of 50% through the assigned pay grade. This is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. It's another ordinance that we discussed. The law director presented her case why she needs this person at this particular rate, and I make a motion that we adopt 12617.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of the ordinance. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay?
Nay.
Okay. The motion carries on a 5-1 vote. Ordinance 12717 is an ordinance amending Ordinance 417, reallocating revenues from the city income tax and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by the Finance and Personnel Committee.
Thank you, Madam President. I think in our discussions tonight, we've talked about how our revenues are brought into our general fund and allocated to different funds at different percentages. Essentially, this ordinance, when adopted, simply decreases an allocation from 20% to 19% and increases another from 2% to 3%. So I hereby make a motion that we adopt 12717.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of 12717. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12817 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to suspend temporarily the fee for parking at metered spaces in the municipal parking garage and declaring an emergency. It's introduced by Councilmember Pappy.
Thank you. I move to adopt 12817.
Second.
And just so everyone's clear, this is our yearly closing, not closing, but dropping the fee for the parking garage to help the uptown businesses during the holiday season. Service Safety Director is authorized to suspend the fee for parking in the garage, excluding 2-hour metered spaces on 1-up or as follows: after 5 p.m. on Thursday, November 30th, December 7th and 14th, and all day Saturday, December 2, 9, and 16.
Okay. And point of clarification, that is on the upper floors, because I know sometimes we've had confusion with people coming in and thinking that all the meters were free. Right. Okay. So we have a motion and second for approval of 12817. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 12917 is an ordinance suspending Athens City Code, Section 7.05.03, continuous parking in the same location from Sunday, December 17th, 2017, through midnight on Sunday, January 1st, 2018, and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Pappy.
Thank you. I move to adopt 12917.
Second.
This is another ordinance that we utilize over the holiday season to free up our street parking for locals who stay here for the holidays and who may have visitors. So we suspend the continuous parking rule from Sunday, December 17th through midnight on Sunday, January 1st.
Okay, we have motion and second for approval of 12917. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 13217 is an ordinance providing for the issuance of $250,000 of notes by the City of Athens, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of renewing notes previously issued to pay part of the cost of improvements to this municipality's wastewater treatment plant and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I make a motion that we adopt 13217.
Second.
This has been discussed. This is how the city goes about servicing a large debt to pay for the improvements that were made. I think there were over $17 million worth of improvements put in there, and this is how we pay it off.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of 13217. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 13317 is an ordinance providing for the issuance of $325,000 of notes by the City of Athens, Ohio, in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of renewing notes issued for the purpose of paying part of the costs of design engineering of the water treatment plant facility improvements, projects 307, and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we adopt 13317.
Second.
This particular ordinance is different than the previous one in that this is not servicing a debt for a project completed, but actually getting one started. This is the planning portion of it. We need to pay for these plans, so this is how we're going to go about doing it.
Okay, we have a motion and second for approval of 13317. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. We have 3 ordinances for second reading, 2 of which we'll just be reading the titles, and then I believe 1 of which we'll be suspending. Ordinance 13417 is an ordinance to rezone the Madison Heights minor subdivision property located on the corner of East State Street and Madison Avenue, introduced by Councilmember Fall. Ordinance 13517 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code, Title III, Administrative Provisions, Chapter 3.11, Domestic Registry, Section 3.1101, Definitions, and Section 3.1102, Domestic Partnership Criteria, introduced by Councilmember Fall. Ordinance 13617 is an ordinance amending the 2017 Appropriation Ordinance and is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that we suspend the rules for 13617.
Second.
The reason for the suspension is that in part of this ordinance, there are court fees, processing fees that for the municipal court that have to be paid. Okay. So in order to pay these, we'll need to suspend this ordinance.
Okay, we have a motion and second for suspending the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember
Thank you,
Reisner.
Madam President. I move that we adopt 13617.
Second.
Before we vote, I'd like to read a portion of it. The 2017 Appropriation Ordinance 15016 is hereby amended by appropriating from the unappropriated balance the following sum: $20,000 to General Fund Municipal Court 1011016 TC 300 for process servicing fees, $8,000 to Transportation Fund 214 TC 200 for gas and oil, $21,000 to Parking Garage Fund 730 TC 600 for transfer, and $140,000 to Sewer Debt Fund 758 TC 600 for transfer pursuant to 0130-17 and 013117, and increase in the total appropriations by said amounts.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of 13617. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance has been approved. And we now have several ordinances for first reading. 13817 is an ordinance authorizing a 1-year extension of the current franchise agreement with the Ohio Power Company for use of the city right-of-way pursuant to Ordinance 5912 and extended by Ordinances 13512, 9413, 14313, 12614, and 12416, and declaring an emergency. It's introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. We talked about this last week at a committee meeting. It's our right-of-way agreement with AEP about the use of our right-of-ways for their infrastructure, mostly power lines. We do a year. It used to be that we did 3 years for this right-of-way agreement. Now we do it per year because there was some concern about tree trimming. They have heard us and they are better. However, I am keeping it at 1 year because that gives us more control over what happens with our right-of-way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ordinance 13917 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute on behalf of the City of Athens a solar power purchase agreement, SPPA, estoppel certificate, and consent to SPPA assignment and declaring an emergency. This is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. We had a presentation on this earlier. It will go through 3 readings, and this will be concerning our
solar panels over at the community center. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ordinance 14017 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 9, General Regulations, Chapter 9.06, Intoxicating Liquors, Narcotics, to add Section 9.06.20, Cannabis Laws and Penalties. It's introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. This is codifying the results of our election that we had in Athens City concerning criminal penalties in regards with cannabis laws. Thank you.
Ordinance 141.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yes, Mayor Patterson.
I just, in earlier conversations with Law Director, just to point out to Council that since the citizens have voted on this and it has passed, it's kind of interesting that does it need to go through 3 readings? I know that this is kind of a new thing that we're talking about in terms of suspending. I don't understand what the need would be to have to go through all 3 readings as opposed to suspending and approving, because all we're doing is codifying something that,
right,
again, the citizens have voted on and has passed.
Right. Tomorrow, the Board of Elections will meet to certify the results of the election. The revised code does state that the initiative petition will become effective on the 5th day after the day on which the board certifies the official vote. So this is a way, I talked with the clerk of council about this, on how do we actually codify it so that everyone is on notice. And this seems to be the best way to do it, this single reading, and then to adopt it tonight. And the mayor, you don't have veto power on this.
I do not.
No.
So you're saying you want to suspend it tonight or wait?
Yes.
Okay. So I move that we suspend rules for 14017.
Second?
Thank you.
Can we have a second, please?
Nobody wants a second?
Nobody wants a second?
No, I just want to ask a question. I'll second it, okay, second.
Now we have a motion and second for suspending the rules.
Interesting, right.
And I think we need to vote on the suspension first,
Right.
unless you have a question about the suspension.
No.
And then we'll have discussion.
Right.
Okay. So I have a motion and second for suspending the rules on ordinance 14017. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, the rules have been suspended. And now you'll need to make a motion to approve.
I move that we approve 14017.
Second?
Okay, and so we have a motion and second for the approval of this. Are there any questions or comments?
Question.
Councilor Reisner.
The law director pointed out the board is meeting tomorrow to certify the election. Now, does that mean that until the election is certified, it's not officially complete, it's not over, can therefore this, what we're doing here, really apply to it, since it's not really before us legally? See what I'm kind of saying?
Section 2 states that pursuant to 731-130 or 31, this ordinance will become effective on the 5th day after the official vote is certified. So if it's not certified, then it won't be effective.
And it won't be in effect until 5 days after tomorrow.
Yes, that's right.
Which on a normal ordinance, it's a 30-day period unless it has an emergency clause.
Right, but
So-
in this case,
Right.
after my legal research, the mayor doesn't have any veto power.
Right.
This
So-
was just a way for
Okay.
us to codify it, to put everyone on notice. Otherwise, I mean, we have no other means to have it
Okay.
in our Athens City Code.
So it's a valid question, it just means that, yeah, if it's not certified, then this won't go into effect.
All right, okay,
Okay.
satisfied.
And we have a Councilmember Smedley.
Yeah, thank you. Would it make sense, or is there any justification or need to adjust the ordinance to say something to the effect of, upon certification from the Athens County Board of Elections, or something to that effect, to sort of address what Member Reisner was bringing up, the fact that this really doesn't go into effect until 6 days from now?
Well, it does say that in Section 2.
It does.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, then it's already addressed. Thank you.
We've got it covered. Okay.
So my comment is that in following this, and apparently in other places in Ohio where it was an initiative and passed, the cities have decided not to follow the, did I read that correctly? They have chosen not to
Codify it?
I guess codify it.
No, I talked to Toledo, and it's a part of their city code. I did talk to Toledo.
And so do they enforce it? Maybe that's the word I should have
talked to the law
used.
director's office there, and it hasn't changed how their police officers cite people. They still cite them under the Ohio Revised Code.
So that was something that I wanted to just bring forward, is that, so people are still being cited in some of these other cities where it's happened under the Ohio Revised Code.
Correct.
What is interesting, though, and I think Toledo would be someone to look to, is what happens with citations on state property.
Well, that's interesting because I read in the newspaper that apparently, according to the newspaper, that in Toledo, at the University of Toledo, they were citing under the city code. And our Chief Powers from Ohio University contacted the police chief there, and that's not accurate. They're citing under the revised code, the Ohio Revised Code.
So state property
Yes.
citing under the Ohio Revised
Right.
Code, since it is state property.
Right.
But then the city is also citing under
The
Ohio.
city police
The
office.
city police are also citing under the Ohio Revised Code. And I guess that's an administrative decision, Law Director, from their administration?
That would be a decision of the police chief.
Yes.
I think that you probably read in the paper that last year there were only 6, maybe 7 people cited under the Athens City Code. If they're cited under the city code, it doesn't depenalize it. It doesn't decriminalize it, it depenalizes it. So if they're cited under the city code, they come into court, the fine will be 0 and the court costs will be 0. And they still have a criminal conviction for the way it goes on the record as drug abuse. It just is no penalty.
Okay. I think those are important clarifications.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for approval of 14017. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 14117 is an ordinance amending Athens City Code Title 47 Resource Extraction and Waste Disposal Monitoring and Mitigation Program to add Chapter 47.02, Shale, Gas, and Oil Extraction. And this is introduced by Councilmember Fall.
Thank you. I spoke to the glory of Columbus, thinking about the right way to dispose of brine is to spray it on roadways and freeways. So this is updating our ordinance, which we've had on the books for several years, concerning resource extraction, to cover that and to cover other updates that we have had since the initial ordinance was defined, bringing together this chapter from that date.
So actually, in 2014, this is how, this is before you tonight. In 2014, if you recall, it was on the ballot, an initiative petition, the Bill of Rights on disposal, we'll call it banning the exploration and extraction of shale, gas, and oil with the associated activities and the disposal of associated waste. So that happened in November of 2014, and that was an overwhelming majority of city voters also. I think that was 78% also. And in discussing this with the clerk of council, when we were trying to decide how to get the cannabis ordinance, quote unquote, on the books, we discovered that the Bill of Rights from 2014 was never really codified. It was never really placed in our code. So that's what this is doing. And came to my attention last week when Councilmember Fall was talking about the fracking waste being used on the roadways, and that's actually included in this Bill of Rights. So.
We did.
Anyway, that's why it's before you today, and I would ask for the same process, that it doesn't need, it just needs to have a first reading and
Yeah.
The
So,
citizens voted on this in
Right.
2014.
so I move that we suspend the rules
Second.
Second.
because our law director has said that's what we need to do.
Okay, we have a motion and second for suspending the rules. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The rules have been suspended. Councilmember Fall.
I move that we adopt 141-17.
Second.
And this language is from the Bill of Rights that was by initiative petition in 2014.
But at the same time, there is severability of the individual sections of the chapter if one is found lacking.
That's absolutely right.
Thank you.
In one of the sections, the very last section, it does talk about that. If any of the provisions are, if the court, competent jurisdiction decides any section is illegal or invalid, the other provisions stand.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval, and do we have any other comments or questions?
I would just make a comment that, again, as this body of council and our community, this is an issue that we foresaw back in 2014, back in 2012 when we passed ordinances, and we've been on top of this issue, and there are many other city councils around the state who have looked at the legislation that we've passed as well to look at their own communities, and we were a leader in this area. So the fact that we had never codified this in 2014 is interesting, but we already had the language here because we'd basically done the work and the legwork to protect our community health and safety.
Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of ordinance 141-17. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. And on 142-17, I'll read the title first, an ordinance amending the 2017 appropriation ordinance. And Law Director, we need to amend, but we also wanted to suspend. So I'm thinking we need to amend first, then suspend, then adopt.
I think that that's the only way to do it.
Okay.
So.
All right. Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to amend 142-17. And would someone please tell me how they want this thing amended?
To add 5,000 where?
But
This is adding the 5,000.
the 5,000, but which line?
It's an
580, 580.
to transfer 580 to 580 207. However, when we transfer, it's from an expense line to a fund line, then it's revenue. Then you need to reappropriate that 5,000 in 580 207.
Get all that?
Debbie's writing away.
Okay.
So is this a new appropriation, or there's already money there, we're just moving it?
I think we're just moving it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
So we have a motion and second to amend, as explained by Auditor Heck. The amount's $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Okay, the ordinance has been amended and read for the first time.
I would like to make a motion that we suspend the rules for 142-17.
Second.
And let's see, I had a copy of that somewhere.
And the reason being that we have some
Yes.
immediate expenses.
Mm-hmm. The rest of the ordinance would be $3,000 to Athens City Enhancement Fund, 250 TC 300 for Community Food Initiative, $7,500 to Water Fund, 740 636 TC 100 to cover personnel services in year-end. And I think this is where we're paying the bill here, is $7,000 Sewer Fund, 750 637 TC 100 to cover personnel services through in year-end.
Okay. And so right now, this is our vote on suspending the rules. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay? Okay, the rules have been suspended. So now we'll need the motion to adopt.
Make a motion that we adopt 143, or 142.17.
Second.
Okay.
Again, it's
As described.
as described.
Yeah. Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of 142.17. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. The motion carries and the ordinance is approved. Ordinance 143.17 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into contract with the Employee Benefit Service Center to serve as the city's third-party health insurance administrator and declaring an emergency. Introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. Of course, just the first reading. I think there's any need to suspend. I think we can go 3 readings on this. Essentially, the city is just contracting the services of a third party to handle our medical insurance administration. So.
Okay, thank you. Ordinance 144.17 is an ordinance authorizing a stop-loss medical insurance contract and declaring an emergency. And this is introduced by Councilmember Reisner.
Thank you, Madam President. I can read Section 1, effective January 1, 2018. The Service Safety Director is hereby authorized to enter into a 1-year contract with the Cirrus America to cover the city stop-loss insurance. I believe we can go for 3 readings on this. Is there any?
We can.
Okay. That's what we'll do.
Okay, thank you. We have a few other business items. One, a motion to accept the auditor's October 2017 financial reports.
So moved.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion and second. All those in favor of approval of those reports signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, opposed? They've been accepted. For other announcements, just to let citizens know that we will be having a committee meeting on November 27th. And then we'll be having a special session on December 7th. And this will be followed by our business meeting again on the, the 11th. So the 11th will be our final meeting in December if things work out well. So just to let people know about that. Mayor, you had 4 or 5, excuse me.
Did we miss 5912?
Resolution.
Granting a franchise to Ohio Power Company?
No, we did that.
We did that? Okay. I must have gone to sleep.
Okay.
I think it's a different number.
Okay. That's
Okay.
a different number.
All right. So we do have some, and are there any other announcements from council member? I don't want to forget that. So
I just want to clarify, what time was the meeting on Thursday, December 7th?
7 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay. And on the 11th.
Okay. Mayor.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick. Just several announcements. Given that this is Thanksgiving week, there will be a one-day trash delay. The Thursday's route will be picked up on Friday, Fridays on Saturday. The city building will be closed Thursday the 23rd and Friday the 24th for Thanksgiving. Emergency operations will, as always, be in operation. As well as the community center will be open on Wednesday, the 22nd, from 6 to 6, and then closed the 23rd and the 24th. Normal hours resume on Saturday. The fire chief has asked me to at least caution people while using deep fryers for your turkeys. Don't put them in there frozen, but just be careful. Make sure that deep fryer is away from your structure, from your home, your garage or whatever, because if not attended to carefully, bad things can happen. I also want to alert everyone that the comprehensive plan survey, one last chance. It's an easy survey to do. You go online, go to the city's website, and you can start filling out the survey. The survey is only 8 questions long, so this does not take a lot of time to fill out. So we encourage the citizens to look at that. Want to give a quick update too. The Avon water line final connections are going to be taking place We don't have a firm date, but likely sometime next week. So there will be some water disruption and likely a boil order in that area. Also, not to concern people, but to make sure they're informed, is they're also going to, with these connections, have to do a smoke test down there. Just to make sure everyone is aware that that's going to be going on. So council is aware and the citizens are aware, we are the lead plaintiff. We are the first plaintiff of 137 municipalities across the state in the lawsuit pertaining to HB 49. So you'll likely see this in the near future, to where it is the city of Athens versus the state of Ohio. When it comes to this piece of legislation, this is the legislation, HB 49, is about the centralized business tax collection, which is, again, as you guys all know, it's one more claw at trying to strip away home rule. I personally, and I hope council is too, I'm proud that we are the #1 name on that list of plaintiffs moving forward. I have to give a lot of credit to Tina Timberman, because she really has led the charge with this, as have a lot of other people. Kent Scarrett up at OML, the executive director. I know that our law director, Lisa Eliason, has been watching this carefully too. So this will be interesting as it rolls forward. Frost Brown Todd is the legal representation for all 137 municipalities. So I want council to be aware of that. We received from SolSmart the bronze designation for being a solar-friendly municipality. There are 3 tiers to that: bronze, silver, and gold. During the National League of Cities Conference, I was there to receive this award from SolSmart. I also represented the county as well as the village of Amesville, all 3, who are all members of SOPEC, the Southeast Ohio Public Energy Council. We all received that designation and strive to move up to the silver level. And so we're working on that as we speak. I mentioned that I was at NOPEC. Now that the City of Athens has membership on the NOPEC Executive Board, I was up there last Tuesday representing Southeastern Ohio. It was a real eye-opener. It's interesting to be involved at that level. There are 15 other board members that are all from Northeastern Ohio, representing their municipalities and their counties. So I'm really, my seat is representing the county under SOPEC as one of the executive directors for SOPEC. So more to follow on that as updates move forward, and I keep attending those executive board meetings, which is 7 times a year. Couple last items. As I mentioned, I went straight from Cleveland, got back on the road and drove to Charlotte for the National League of Cities Conference, to which I serve on now several boards and councils. I was just appointed to the Small City Council. I already was a member of the University Community Council, as well as the Public Safety and Crime Prevention Advocacy Council. I do want to disclose to council that as a cost savings measure of making such a trek, I saved the city $780 by driving there versus flying there. I drove. It was a long drive. But I also stayed at a lodging that was not the conference hotel. The conference hotel's pricing was about $180. I stayed somewhere for $60. So I just want council to know that I'm being very prudent when I attend these conferences and whatnot. So, and I also, in full disclosure, do not file for per diem. That's my choice. I pay for my own meals when I'm there because I just think that that's the right thing to do. Just real quick, the last few updates I want to give you. When it came to NLC, I was there for 4 days, learned lots, engaged quite a bit, representing the City of Athens and the State of Ohio. Something I want council to be aware of, and I want the listeners tonight who are still tuned in, I know it's late, is that a lot of the conversation at the NLC was about preemption. You're going to hear that term more and more. And the NLC put together this great little I know you can't see this, Ryan or Scott, whoever's running the controls right now, but no, I'm over here. Anyway, it is a preemption wheel chart of all 50 states. And to share with you, and again, the National League of Cities pulled this together. Some of the items under the preemption list that states are using state law to nullify municipal ordinances or authority. Minimum wage is one, anti-discrimination, ride sharing, tax and expenditure limitations, paid leave, home sharing, and municipal broadband. We are kind of on the high end to where for the state of Ohio, some of the preemption that already exists is minimum wage, paid leave, ride sharing, and tax and expenditure limitations to where.
And oil and gas.
That's not on here, but thank you. Oil and gas and things of that nature. So again, by my serving on the small cities as well as the University Communities Council, at least the City of Athens has a voice when we move forward with resolutions to go up to Capitol Hill. I did spend a lot of time this year with the National League of Cities because I do serve on the Public Safety and Crime Prevention Advocacy Council. I spent a lot of time working with the council, crafting resolutions, kind of the sense of our body. And I'll go through these quickly. A number of resolutions, one in support of federal efforts to reduce gun violence and prevent prohibited individuals from shipping, transporting, receiving, or possessing firearms or ammunition. We also worked on, in support of legislation to reauthorize the Mental Ill Offender Treatment and Crime Reduction Act, in support of legislation to reauthorize the Second Chance Act, which is for people who have been incarcerated. Another resolution on urging the federal government to clarify the de-obligated process to prevent approved disaster relief funds. I'll skip some of these because some may require more explanation than the title has in it, but we worked on a lot. Another resolution in support of the federal efforts to combat the opiate epidemic and prescribed opiate abuse. Support of legislation to reauthorize the National Flood Insurance Program. And finally, a resolution in opposition to the federal efforts to withhold funding from sanctuary cities. A lot of information came out of a session on that alone, but Council, I want you to know that I don't sit idly when I go to these meetings. It's their work in progress, and that's just kind of a testament to some of the work that I'm putting in support of our city and Southeastern Ohio as I attend these conferences. And again, it's rewarding. It's a lot of networking that goes on as well. The mayor of Chillicothe, Luke Feeney, was there. He and I kind of played the divide and conquer game and attended as many different sessions as we possibly could in our time there.
Okay. Any other announcements?
Well, I'd like to follow with what the mayor said. The National City League is essential because given the current federal people, this is where the United States is leading. It's with the cities and with the states. We're leading, they're taking the reins of climate change, fighting opioids, because our federal government has shown that they're not interested in doing things that are good for the people of the country. And the National City League is really essential in that, lobbying and putting forward the needed, what we need as municipalities, big and small. And so I've gone to several of the leagues, and they are very interesting, and they are really useful. So thank you.
Good comments.
I have one last item, if I may, and this is important. What was shared with me from our city engineer is that we received our report card from ODOT's the central office of the Ohio Department of Transportation when they looked through the LPA process, And as he coined it, going through a bunch of gobbledygook in this report, which I am more than happy to provide to council, we received basically an A+ report card from District 10 and from the central office when it came to our LPA, our local project administration. Andy Stone also goes on to say that we all know that Jessica Dine is a superstar, but it needs to be recognized that she has worked tirelessly. You know, we're extremely fortunate to have her. And others who worked on this, Michelle down at EPW, as well as Patty Whitmer has been involved in this process. But Jessica Dine really has been the lead on all these projects. So the city engineer, director of engineering and public works, wanted me to let council know, number one, how well we did. An A+ is not easy to obtain. And secondly, that our deputy director, assistant director for engineering and public works, who is also a certified engineer, needs to be given a lot of credit for that.
I would just second the Jessica Dine with the sewer project there, the North Congress sewer project. I can't tell you the amount of comments I got from neighbors who appreciated her, talking with them, coming, several times a week to see how things were going or to ask questions. And then putting a city employee there daily to manage, I think the neighbors really felt good about that because, again, that shows that there was city oversight and then any questions or concerns were immediately addressed back to whoever it needed to go to. So that was a good communication effort, is what I've heard from neighbors.
Okay. Thank you. We've got an opportunity for citizens to speak on agenda items or legislative items and city services not covered on the agenda. Is there anybody who wanted to speak? Okay. We're going to go into executive session, and so we'll do the motion and the vote for that. And then immediately after that, we'll have 5 minutes because I know there's some members of the press here who may want to ask questions of council members. So you'll be able to do that as soon as we do this vote. So I'd entertain a motion for going into executive session.
For the purpose of?
Yes, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of compensation of a public employee.
And the persons to be part of the discussion, executive session?
I would like to invite Member Butler, myself, Member Pappy Fall, President of Council, Member Costas, Smedley, and the Law Director. Mr. Mayor, would you, okay?
Sure.
Mayor, and the Auditor.
Okay. So we have a motion and second for going into executive session. Councilmember Butler.
Aye.
Aye.
Councilmember Reisner. And Councilmember Pappy.
Aye.
Councilmember Fall.
Aye.
Councilmember Katsas.
Aye.
Councilmember Smedley.
Aye.
Okay. All right. So we'll go into, it's 9:15 now. We've got 5 minutes, so we'll go into session at 9:20.